Hey, this is Chris from Stockspot. Now, these days, with so many different ETFs to choose from, I think there's over 300 in Australia, one of the questions we're starting to get more of is how much international exposure do I need in my portfolio versus local exposure? It's a good question because global indices that own shares from around the world typically only have about 2% in the Australian share market. We're not a big part of the world. So as an Australian investor, is that the right amount? Should it be more? Should it be less? In this video, I want to be talking about some of the key considerations that we had in determining the right global versus Australian allocation to shares. Now, when we've looked at this, the main consideration is how do you get the best return versus risk ratio? So how do we give you the best return for the least amount of risk? And why this is interesting is that as an Australian investor, if you invest all of your money into overseas shares, you can get a great long-term return, but you end up taking quite a lot of volatility risk because global markets tend to be more volatile, particularly once you include the Australian dollar volatility as well. The other thing about investing globally is you miss out on that amazing tax benefit we get here in Australia, which is franking credits. So when you look at those and combine them and then look at different combinations of Australian versus global shares, what we found is that typically having between 40 to 60% of your equity or your share part of your portfolio in Australian shares, and also somewhere between 40 and 60% in global shares, that's about the right mix. To make a very easy rule of thumb, about 50-50 is about right. And if you have a look into big super fund allocations, they tend to be something like this. I've seen some super funds with more like 70% in global shares, but then I've also seen some with more like 40%. But it seems like big super funds have found something similar, that having a reasonably even split between Australian and global shares is about right. I've also read a lot of research on this. One of the best pieces is actually by Vanguard, who's looked at it as part of their analysis into building diversified portfolios. And their research, and this was back testing a lot of data in Australia, found something very similar, that around that 40 to 60% was right. There's periods historically where having a larger global allocation would have done better. The last 10 years is a great example because Australian shares have underperformed, but that's very hard to predict. Now, all of our Stockspot portfolios are broadly within these ranges, and we also allow clients to add themes. And so if you want to have more global exposure, what you can do is add some global thematic ETFs to your portfolio, which reduces the weight to Australian shares and increases the weight to global shares. Now, the final kind of question we get around this is also around hedging. These days, you can pick unhedged global ETFs or hedged global ETFs. Which one's best? And if you look at super funds, sometimes they'll have a mix of hedged and unhedged global shares. Our view is that as an Australian investor, unhedged makes most sense, and it's for a couple of reasons. One, you're actually getting a second layer of diversification, which is currency diversification. Not only are you diversified across global shares, but all of the currencies that they're denominated in, you get diversification across. But the second reason is actually a risk-related reason. If you're unhedged, typically when there's a big market fall, the Australian dollar falls as well, and that helps to actually give your portfolio more of a cushion. And so being unhedged with your global shares helps to reduce the risk in your overall portfolio as well. So really two things to think about if you're working out how much global exposure you need versus Australian exposure is, are you more focused on kind of growth and capital growth or dividends? That might lean you slightly one way or another, but generally the research shows that somewhere between 40 to 60% in your domestic Australian shares and 40 to 60% in global shares makes sense. It's similar to what we offer at Stockspot. And if you want to explore the Stockspot portfolios and our specific allocations to different countries, you can find that on the Stockspot website and on the fact sheets that we have published on the portfolio pages.